Happy 2022! I hope your new year has gone well so far amid every unwanted thing that insisted on dragging itself in from 2021. Before we get into the substance of the video, I want to give a special welcome to the 100 or so people who found and subscribed to the channel as a result of my involvement in Paleo Rewind. I really appreciate the interest and support, and I look forward to providing you with what I hope will be a long subscription life full of interesting content. On a schedule I can manage anyway. I am still just one guy with other obligations and priorities, and working on my rudimentary video production skills. But I'll try to make sure that what I do release on a roughly monthly basis is always a step up from what I did before, and I'll be sure to update y'all on things I'm working on once I get the community posts function that comes with having 500 subscribers. January on YouTube tends to be full of videos of people talking about their plans for the coming year. This isn't quite that, but it's the closest you'll probably get from me. Some of the bigger and more exciting things I've got planned for the channel I do want to keep under wraps for right now, 75% for the surprise, and 25% out of fear of jinxing them. But as a small preview of some of what you can expect from me over the next 12 months, I figured I'd do a little top-of-the-year roundup of some of the Paleo media projects I'm aware of that should be seeing major developments in 2022 that I'm personally looking forward to, or otherwise just keeping an eye on. Chances are that you've probably heard of some if not all of these, and if so, then that's great. I hope you're just as excited for them as I am. Not all of these will necessarily be covered on the channel beyond this video, but I at least want to amplify their existence, especially as the dinosaur media juggernaut that is Jurassic World is set to make its big return this summer with Dominion, and I think it's worthwhile to highlight some of these smaller, and mostly better, projects, if for no other reason than to show that Paleo media can and should have more than just one single monopolizing franchise. So without further ado, in top 5 order, here are some things to look forward to. Zoo Tycoon games actually aren't something I've had much of an interest in my limited gaming experience, but I do remember watching videos made in Jurassic Park Operation Genesis back in the day, and liking the idea of the freedom and creativity that comes with having the tools to create your own park or nature preserve. I don't really have the same attitude towards either of the Jurassic World Evolution installments, partly because of how much I don't care for the creature designs and the overall look of the games, plus the seemingly more limited AI functionality and customizable options, paired with some not-so-great, we clearly couldn't afford the film actors' voice work.
Whatever the reason, this need to somehow have mastery over dinosaurs, this is our mistake. We need their trust. Turning them on each other isn't going to get us there.
If this floats your boat, then more power to you. But to me, as someone who doesn't even have the hardware required to play any of the games I'll be talking about in this video, so what are my qualifications anyway, it's a nah. To that end, Prehistoric Kingdom looks quite appealing, and I've been loosely following its development over the last few years as Blue Meridian Games revamped their designs and graphics, and steadily added more features as they push towards an early access launch that should hopefully happen in April. The creature designs are very well done, and have a nice variety of intricate colors and patterns, and I really like the different ways they use this variation. For some, the designs represent different equally accurate or plausible views of the animal's life appearances, acknowledging that there's still a lot we don't know about how they looked in the flesh, and presenting beautiful takes on various valid alternate hypotheses. For example, large coelurosaurs like Tyrannosaurus and Deinocheirus have both feathered and unfeathered variants, since we don't know to what extent they actually had feathery pelts, and it's nice to see and have both options to play with. For other creatures, the different designs are actually representations of different individual species, and I appreciate this a lot. See, our way of talking and thinking about dinosaurs and prehistoric animals in general usually reduces them to the genus level. With a handful of exceptions, any ancient creature name you know is most likely just its genus name, but this view overlooks the fact that many of these taxa contain multiple species. This would be like if we referred to big cats as just Panthera, and didn't consider the different species within the genus: Panthera leo, Panthera tigris, Panthera onca, pardus, and uncia. If we talked about and thought about them the way we do with dinosaurs, we would be overlooking so much of the appearance and behavioral diversity that actually exists within the group. So I'm really glad to see that Prehistoric Kingdom doesn't shy away from that diversity, and in fact leans into it a lot in its game design. Take Edmontosaurus for example. It's got 3 different species, all of which have their own distinctive appearances, sizes, preferred habitats, and social requirements. And that level of care and attention to detail really helps bring these animals to life, along with their beautiful animations, behaviors, and sound effects. There are a few naming choices that are likely to annoy some more pedantic dinosaur taxonomists, like the Asian tube-crested Carnosaurus jiainensis and dewlap-bearing Tarbosaurus batar, being merged into their North American counterparts Parasaurolophus and Tyrannosaurus respectively. but it's really not something I'm fussed about considering that the individual species level relationships are the same regardless of where you draw the genus line. Aside from the nearly 50 or so different creatures that'll eventually be present, the variety and customizability of habitats, environments, and architectural structures is pretty exciting to me. I've seen some really creative exhibit designs already in playthroughs of the early builds, and the in-game camera mode makes for so much screenshot potential. If I were to ever get this game, I honestly might not even build a proper zoo, just a safari-type nature preserve with some fences and different habitats, plop down some regionally appropriate animals, and just see how things play out once the AI have a full range of fleshed out behaviors. All of this while the beautifully cinematic soundtrack plays in the background. I'm a huge fan of the different variations of the already solid main theme, and listening to it while selecting pieces for this video was one of my genuinely favorite parts of this project. So overall, Prehistoric Kingdom is already setting the bar pretty high for my expectations and anticipations. The only reason it's at the bottom of my list is just because tycoon simulators aren't quite my cup of tea, aside from the game's relative inaccessibility to me personally. If I ever do get a machine capable of running it though, you can bet it'll be featured on this channel, so there's some aspirational vibes for you. When I was a little kid, one of my favorite spots on the early internet was the dinosaur section of the BBC's website. The orange and brown themed webpage had a handful of games based on the various Walking With programs that existed at the time. The two that got the most playtime from me were Dinosaur World and the Big Al game. The former had to be downloaded and so I could only play it in certain locations which were not home, while the latter was browser-based. Both were set in the Jurassic period, but took different approaches to presenting it in game form. Dinosaur World was a semi-open world virtual scavenger hunt based on Time of the Titans, the second episode of the original Walking With Dinosaurs series, while the Big Al game was a click-based text adventure where you played as the titular Big Al, a real Allosaurus individual whose short and brutal life was the focus of the Walking With Dinosaurs spin-off episode, The Ballad of Big Al. Like I said, I loved both of these games, and when I randomly revisited the site in my mid-teens, I was sad to see that they and the others had been removed and replaced by some much lamer game. A few years after this, I discovered Saurian, an open-world video game that seeks to do exactly what I'd always wished and wondered why the BBC never did. Combine the virtual experience of Dinosaur World with the growth and survival aspect of the Big Al game. Based in the late Cretaceous Hell Creek Formation of South Dakota, this early access project has a well-earned reputation for striving to be the most accurate recreation of a prehistoric ecosystem yet made, and within the limitations of an AI-dominated video game anyway, lets you experience the life of a dinosaur firsthand. There was a point where a decent amount of my YouTube consumption was Saurian playthroughs, and I've found its gameplay and overall atmosphere to be a great encapsulation of John Goodman's line from When Dinosaurs Roamed America in the best ways.
Contrary to popular opinion, life in a primeval forest is filled with endless days of boredom. Moments of terror are only fleeting.
It's an important thing to remember when thinking about the natural world. What we see in nature documentaries is often just the most dramatic parts of what could be several years' worth of footage and observation condensed down into an hour or so. But in that same 60-minute interval in real life, you'd more likely than not just see animals simply eating, laying around, or going for a casual stroll to the local water source. The amount of times I've seen someone surprised that a T-Rex just waltzed by and paid them no mind is a great example of how lost this fact is on a lot of people, and I'm glad Saurian was designed with this more relaxed approach in mind to convey that dinosaurs were just animals. Aside from being a decently pretty game ripe for landscape and sky-focused screenshots, plus the creature designs, some of which are arguably just short of iconic, and have become some of the most popular and well-known portrayals of their respective species, what I've always enjoyed and appreciated about watching Saurian's development is the amount of stuff I've learned all about the science that's gone into its creation. From the importance of understanding biostratigraphy, aka the specific ages of layers of rock within a fossil formation, to the variety of non-avian dinosaurs that populated the Mesozoic world and would have made these ancient environments not all that unrecognizable to someone from the present day, the long list of things that goes into allowing us to understand and recreate this very specific piece of the past in such detail was a huge part in reigniting my interest in paleontology as a whole. As it stands, the game currently has Dakotaraptor steini, which Saurian arguably made famous, and Triceratops prorsus as playable creatures, and my hope for this year is that the developers at Irvogel Games will be able to add the breeding and nesting mechanics they're currently working on before getting out their reworked Tyrannosaurus Rex for players to stalk the floodplains with. It's no secret that the development has been disappointingly slow in recent years, but the fact that the team has continued to plug away at it after all this time, even after having one of their former heads steal a bunch of funding, tells me that there's very much still energy left for the full project to come to fruition. Hopefully by that time, I'll have a computer that can handle it. A couple playthroughs as each sex of the 6 different species would be a great addition to the channel, I think. Shifting from video games that I won't be able to play anytime soon because of my own technical limitations, Dinosauria is the next project on my list, and a bit of a cheat since most of its episodes have already been released. I'm sure many of you have seen or at least heard of this one before, but if you're unfamiliar, the beautiful animations you're seeing make up 5 independent stories within this anthology of short films depicting life across late Cretaceous North America, and were all produced by David Armsby for his channel Dead Sound. I actually do intend on making a review video going in-depth on its various installments once the last 2 episodes are released, so I won't spoil anything of the stories themselves or what I have to say on them specifically. What I will say is that everything about Dinosauria is immaculately put together. The creature appearances, movements, sound design, environments, music choices, and color palettes are all crafted and curated with such care and attention to detail, while still keeping things both visually and narratively simple and engaging. You can feel the love and artisanship that went into every frame, grunt, and landscape through the animations alone, and each film has a 20+ minute follow-up video where Armsby explains his creative and research process, which is fascinating unto itself. To be clear, this is not a documentary. Armsby is very frank and honest with where he intentionally takes creative liberties, and stresses that this is an artistic venture first and foremost. But he has so much research going into those creative choices regarding how the animal's speculative behaviors and anatomies factor into the storylines that I cannot really fault him too heavily on most of the inaccuracies that I've noticed, and many are excusable to a reasonable degree. Overall, I just think that Dinosauria is a perfect example of how art and science don't have to be mutually opposed factors, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing the rest of the project. Unfortunately, I have to cut this one short so I have something left for my eventual series review, but I'll end by saying that if you haven't seen Dinosauria yet, do yourself a favor and watch the episodes that have already come out, and be sure to keep an eye open for the final 2 installments that I expect will be released early this year. So far, Armsby's been dropping 1 episode per month, and the last one was in early December, so we should be getting the next one fairly soon. It's actually the one I've been looking forward to the most. Moving into the realm of actual documentaries, Forgotten Bloodlines: Agate has been by far one of my most anticipated projects for the last year or so in any media genre, ever since it was first announced back in December 2020 by one of its creators, Max Bolomeo, aka Digital Duck. The 40-minute film is slated for a 2022 release, and focuses on the creatures of Miocene-aged Nebraska at a site now called the Agate Fossil Beds. Aside from the young age of most of the creative team, who nabbed everyone's favorite prehistoric presenter Nigel Marven as narrator, the actual project itself has a number of admirable and exciting things that I want to highlight here. Firstly, the setting. As I said, Forgotten Bloodlines: Agate is set in the early Miocene epoch, somewhere between 20 to 15 million years ago, a time when the world was experiencing a global cooling event that saw the expansion of open prairies and grasslands across much of western North America, and the disappearance of more tropical, closed-forest environments. The Miocene was a rather pivotal time for the evolution of mammals, with many of the modern groups originating here, and the continents of Eurasia and Africa connecting, allowing different animals to move into new lands. Given this, it's a bit surprising that no similar piece of paleomedia has ever actually covered this time period. In fact, Walking with Beasts skipped right over it between episodes 3 and 4, jumping straight from the Oligocene to the Pliocene. With this comes the featuring of a variety of animals that have never properly received the spotlight before. The 2 main species are the vaguely swine-like Daeodon shoshonensis, which despite the popular term hell pig or Terminator pig, is actually more closely related to hippos and whales, and the bizarrely postured clawed giant Moropus elatus, a distant cousin of horses, rhinos, and tapirs. These 2 might be vaguely familiar to you since their relatives briefly featured as background creatures in Walking with Beasts, but now it's their time to shine, and they and the menagerie of other strangely familiar animals that'll be making appearances in the film have all been brought to life with amazing detail by Bolomeo and his team. There isn't much footage or screenshots from the project yet, but the little we've seen so far shows plenty of beautifully rendered and animated hair textures, muscle twitches, ear flicks, leaf litter, veiny and saggy bits across the body, and even something the 2019 Lion King remake didn't feature in all its CGI glory: anuses and genitals. Even Saurian didn't give most of its creatures the equivalent parts, and for dinosaurs, they're just dealing with the single, all-purpose opening called a cloaca. Meanwhile, these guys are out here designing and animating all the swinging and saggy bits that we mammals have down there. That's commitment to accuracy if I've ever seen it. Overall, Forgotten Bloodlines Agate is coming in at the perfect time to fill a perfect void. Prehistoric mammals in general already get so little play in paleo media, let alone ones that aren't the handful of Ice Age classics. Hopefully it proves successful enough to merit further installments as planned. The Cenozoic has so many, well, forgotten bloodlines, and the world of the last 66 million years is just as bizarre and captivating as the Age of Reptiles that came before. You can definitely expect me to talk about or otherwise do something for this film when it releases sometime this year. Hopefully sooner rather than later. Before we go to my most anticipated piece of 2022, I want to briefly cover some honorable mentions that didn't make the top 5 cut, but are still interesting enough to me to warrant a look. Through the Eyes of Dinosaurs is another indie CGI documentary that seeks to essentially be an updated and expanded take on the Walking with Dinosaurs formula. Originally named Dinosauria, Ascension, Domination, Downfall, before rebranding to its current title to avoid confusion with Armsby's anthology series, this project is slated for a series of 10 half-hour-long episodes, spanning the entirety of the Mesozoic and highlighting the evolution and diversity of dinosaurs across their 180 million year reign. Their Twitter only recently became active a few months ago, but from what little there is to see right now, it certainly looks like an interesting and ambitious project that I'd love to see succeed. If you're already in the online paleosphere, then you might recognize some of the folks involved, so it's definitely in good hands, and hopefully they'll reach their production goal of having the first episode released by the end of this year. Mesozoic Life is yet another indie documentary focusing on dinosaurs, and featuring the work of folks you might be familiar with. Like with Through the Eyes of Dinosaurs, there isn't much information available on it right now, or what exactly it'll cover, but what I have seen looks interesting. It seems to have originated as a 2D short film series similar to Dinosauria, but at some point shifted to a photorealistic 3D look. Both look good, though I do wish they'd stuck with their original concept. I'd love to see some fluid 2D dinosaur animations, and it would certainly make for a very unique look. I couldn't find anything insofar as specific goals for 2022, so this will be one to just watch and see how it progresses over the year. If you've followed me on Twitter over the latter half of 2021, then this next one's probably going to be a bit of a surprise to you, but I'm genuinely curious as to what's going to happen with the NBC series La Brea. The first season finished airing back in November, shortly after it was announced, to the surprise of everybody, myself included, that the show had been greenlit for a second season. Now, I don't really think the show is good per se. The characters are generally uninteresting and or unlikable, and the story and dialogue is nothing to write home about except for how unintentionally funny some of it is. Not to mention that the whole premise of being stranded in Ice Age California is severely underutilized throughout most of the first season at least, so the limited number and variety of creatures that have appeared so far all only show up for 1, maybe 2 very brief scenes per episode, and don't look all that fantastic. Basically it's Terra Nova with a smaller budget and slightly different setting, and that show barely made it to the end of its first season even though it had dinosaurs and the production backing of Steven Spielberg himself. However, La Brea's season finale, which I still haven't actually watched, finally brought most if not all of the cast to the Pleistocene, and featured a very nicely animated and decently accurate Columbian mammoth. So my hope for the second season is twofold. Firstly, that the story will finally remain entirely in the prehistoric world, instead of all the cutting back and forth between the Ice Age and modern day. Secondly, because of this new setting and the seeming upgrade in animation quality as seen with the mammoth, we'll finally get to see more than 1 or 2 animals per episode, and for a substantially longer amount of screen time. Of course, it could just end up being more of the same, but we'll see what happens in September. Feel free to follow me on Twitter if you want some of my live commentary to enhance your viewing experience. With those covered, it's time to reveal my most anticipated pick of 2022. I was raised on shows like When Dinosaurs Roamed America, Dinosaur Planet, and to a lesser extent the Walking With series, so I have a soft spot for films that feature photorealistic CG creatures. This is the main reason why I generally enjoyed Disney's recent The Jungle Book and Lion King remakes, even if other critical aspects flopped and they aren't exactly what I consider necessary movies. One of my main recurrent thoughts while reading about their production and ultimately seeing the films themselves was, man, I wish this budget would go towards something like a BBC or even Disney nature film series about prehistoric life. Well, clearly my thoughts were heard, because shortly before The Lion King was released, Variety reported that the film's director, Jon Favreau, had been slated to produce a landmark television series by the BBC Natural History Unit for Apple TV+, with at least the working title of Prehistoric Planet, which means it's not to be confused with the early 2000s kid-friendly edit of Walking with Dinosaurs and Walking with Beasts that aired on Discovery Kids, nor the 2014 re-edit of the Walking with Dinosaurs film from 2013 with narration by Benedict Cumberbatch. Very little is known about this new series, but I suspect that it's the project I've seen rumors of online as far back as 2017, back when the show was likely in the very earliest stages of planning and pre-production. The few descriptions that have been made public say that it's set during the last days of the dinosaurs, so I assume it's yet another late Cretaceous showcase featuring all your favorites like T-Rex, Triceratops, Ankylosaurus, Edmontosaurus, Quetzalcoatlus, Mosasaurus, and others, hopefully alongside a variety of other creatures too. Judging by the format of BBC Earth's various other series like Planet Earth, Blue Planet, and their sequels, Prehistoric Planet will likely follow a similar globe-hopping model over the course of multiple episodes, and feature short segments of animals doing a variety of things across different habitats, as opposed to being a narrative-driven program set in a single location. Unfortunately, this is about all I can say about it since there's so little information, though paleontologist Dr. Darren Naish has publicly teased his involvement as a consultant, and others seemingly in the know are expecting at least a trailer to drop soon. Hopefully that's the case. No disrespect to botany, but there's already a trailer for Green Planet that just aired back in December. Plants are cool, but I want my dinosaurs. What's more, Dr. Naish has also let on that Prehistoric Planet is not the only big-budget paleo-documentary series in the works, with another 3 or 4 projects all purportedly in development and expected to release in the next few years by various production companies and distributors. So, as you can see, we're just on the cusp of what should be a very exciting time in paleomedia and paleontology on the whole. With so many new discoveries being made on a weekly basis, and various games, films, and books starting to catch up, I'm looking forward to finally seeing the public at large gain a new, revitalized view and appreciation of the history of life on Earth. Until then and through it all, I'll be here to do my own little part, and I hope you'll stick around for that. If there's something you're anticipating that didn't make my list, feel free to drop a link in the comments and tell everyone about it. You can find links to trailers and websites for all the projects mentioned in this video in the description, and I'll be updating my Things to Look Forward to playlist whenever something new drops that I can add to it. Until then, many thanks, stay safe, happy belated New Year, and I will see you next time.